Well, hello, Sad Nation, and welcome to a very special edition of our Sad Chat series. We're very thankful that you're joining us as we celebrate Underage Drinking Prevention Month. We've got an all-star panel today that's going to be giving you the information you need to help you and your friends make positive choices around this subject of alcohol as we celebrate the wide variety of prevention topics and substances that help us make better choices each and every day. We're very proud to partner with responsibility.org, the Foundation for Advancing Alcohol Responsibility, on this project. And I'd like to introduce their CEO at this point to give us a warm welcome.
April is Alcohol Responsibility Month, and responsibility.org is proud to partner with SAD, who will help us with ideas in preventing underage drinking. As a father of a 13-year-old boy and a 15-year-old boy, I am particularly interested in this discussion. Many thanks to Jessica Leahy, the Honorable Jim Carroll, and First Lady Burgum, because they're going to help us understand what we need to think about in our efforts to prevent underage drinking. Great thanks to SAD and our friends who work every day to try to prevent underage drinking. And on behalf of responsibility.org, thank you for participating.
Chris, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for your continued partnership. We could not be more thrilled to count you guys as friends and partners as we work together to keep young people safe. As I said, it does take all of us working together to keep young people safe, and that is why we've assembled an all-star panel today to talk to us about this important issue and what we can do as members of SAD Nation to keep each other safe. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. First, please welcome the Honorable Jim Carroll. Jim is a principal and co-founder of DC Consulting LLC, a strategy and management consulting firm. Previously, Mr. Carroll was sworn in as the director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, often called ONDCP, on January 31st, 2019. Under Mr. Carroll's leadership, the United States saw its first annual decrease in overdose deaths for the first time in nearly 30 years. The amount of drugs seized by law enforcement at our nation's borders were at all-time highs, and the federal grants awarded in support of drug prevention and public health programs also increased. We're also very proud to call Mr. Carroll one of our senior advisors here at SAD, and we're thrilled that you're with us today, Jim. I'll turn it over to you.
Rick, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with everyone today. And really, Rick, you have really put together an all-star cast of people to really talk not only to our members, but to kids who haven't joined, students who haven't joined, parents, teachers, and really so many people who can benefit from this. What we know is the importance of making the right decisions at the right ages. And what we're talking about today is really critical to that. And one of the issues, of course, that we really need to think about is staying safe, being healthy during COVID, but it's also the ability to work with peers, work with other students, other teenagers to make sure that we're doing the right thing. That's why SAD is really the premier organization for kids to make great decisions. We're talking today about alcohol use and the concerns that we have because we've made some great strides thanks to the work of SAD, of responsibility.org, and leaders like the First Lady Burgum, who's with us today, who've talked about this. But last year we saw a plateau, and we saw that some of the gains that we had made in reducing underage drinking had really sort of leveled off. And what we want to make sure is that we're getting the message out that some of these behaviors are because their kids aren't able to interact, students aren't able to touch and reach each other in ways that they're accustomed to by being in the classroom, by being involved in after-school activities. And so what we want to make sure is that we're still getting the message out, that people still understand, our students, our children understand that drinking is really not the right way to go about this and not the right way to handle stress. It's not the right way to sort of loosen up at a party. And the other big issue is it is a drug. It's harmful. It causes permanent impact. And if you're under the age of 21, it's against the law. And you wouldn't want to make a mistake in that lane either. So it's great to be here and sort of talking about these issues and making sure that we're really hitting the population, hitting the demographic that we want to, that SAD has just been able to do for years, reaching out to hundreds of thousands of students. So Rick, it's great to be talking about this today.
Yeah, Jim, we really appreciate that. You make great points. There's still so much more ground to take in this discussion, and we really appreciate having you on the team and on the panel today. So we'll hear more from you here in just a moment. As you said, we're very honored to have the First Lady of North Dakota, Catherine Burgum, with us today. Catherine became the First Lady of North Dakota on December 15th, 2016, when her husband, Governor Doug Burgum, was sworn in as the 33rd governor of the great state of North Dakota. As First Lady, Mrs. Burgum's priority has been supporting and developing initiatives to eliminate the shame and stigma surrounding the disease of addiction in North Dakota's communities. In long-term recovery for 19 plus years, she shares her personal story of finding recovery and encouraging others to do the same as we normalize the conversation around the disease of addiction. She is spreading that word that addiction is a chronic disease and not a character flaw, which we couldn't agree more with here at SAD. Her advocacy work has enabled her to partner with advocates, experts in the field, stakeholders nationwide, including the White House, the Addiction Policy Forum, a number of other foundations where she has served on the board of trustees at the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation. And we're even more proud and honored to call her a partner and friend here at SAD. So thank you so much, Mrs. Burgum, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Rick. It's just so awesome to be here with everyone today in this very cool virtual town hall. And, I'm also especially grateful to be on this panel with Jim Carroll. Thank you again, Jim, for your dedicated service as Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Your leadership elevated these conversations around addiction, peer support, and drug interdiction, and you also stood firm on the need to eliminate the shame and stigma of addiction so more people will reach out for help and find recovery. I'm so grateful for the partnership I've had with you over the past few years. Thank you for honoring me with the opportunities to participate in several important White House discussions around addiction and the national opioid crisis.
Of course.
So, and you know what? I'd love to give a special shout out to the North Dakota SAD chapter, Bismarck Century, Hillsboro, New Rockford, Williston, Devils Lake, and over 30,000 SAD members in North Dakota. Thank you for your courage to step up to the plate and advocate for so many important topics that affect all of you at this critical time in your lives. Now, it's so important to talk about these issues related to addiction, especially now during Alcohol Awareness Month. The topic of underage drinking hits close to home for me because my long battle with addiction started with my own underage drinking when I was in high school in Jamestown, North Dakota. Because of my own lived experience with the disease of addiction, I believe it is so important to focus on prevention so young people don't have to face the struggles that I faced in my own life. When I was in high school, on the outside, it looked like my life was perfect. I had a lot of friends. I was involved in many activities, including like cheerleading and tennis and student council. But on the inside, I constantly had these voices in my head telling me that I was stupid, that I made mistakes, and that I needed to be perfect. If you're from this area, you're like in North Dakota, you're like a lot of families. My family was not unique in that we were also Scandinavian, very Scandinavian. And for those of you who may not understand what that means, we're basically Vikings. My ancestors were traders and warriors and explorers, and we didn't sit around the table and talk about our feelings or our struggles or ask for help. So when I started drinking in high school, I thought I had found nirvana. It seemed to be the answer to all my problems because when I was drinking, the voices in my head disappeared. And as an introvert, I suddenly became an extrovert and I could be anybody I wanted to be. I thought that drinking was the answer until I had my first blackout when I was drinking in high school, which led to many more blackouts in my life. Now, remember, I was just thinking about this as I was getting ready for, this virtual town hall, that I remember this particular incident where I had a friend in high school tell me about something that I had done when I was in a blackout. He told me this story and I didn't believe him because I had absolutely no memory of that event. You think that would have maybe stopped me from, drinking again, but it didn't stop me. And I continued to drink in high school, and that began my 22-year path of blackouts, addiction, and you know what? Continually losing hope that I would never get better. I now know that if there had been resources like SAD or behavioral health specialists in my school that I could have reached out to, I might have prevented actually a life of addiction. Because you know what? They might have told me that my brain wasn't fully developed when I was in high school, and that by drinking when I was in high school, I was putting myself at risk to be almost 6 times more likely to have addiction as an adult. During my addiction, I relapsed over a period of 8 years. I probably don't even need to tell you that those years were a living hell. I'd stay sober for weeks, months, even a year at a time, and then I would start drinking again. My brain would tell me everything's fine and it was okay to drink, because addiction is really a brain disease. Every relapse made me more and more hopeless. No matter how much sobriety I would get, like weeks, months, or years, I could not stay sober. And recovery literally felt impossible. Ultimately, I found recovery because I reached out for help at work. And I had a very supportive team leader. And I also found a program with people. I get emotional about it because it's the key to the rest of my life. But I found a program with people that supported me also on my path to recovery and sobriety. So I'm super grateful to have now been in recovery from my alcohol addiction for over 19 years. So, and my story, thank you. My story is living proof that the disease of addiction does not discriminate. Addiction affects every age, gender, ethnicity, and tax bracket. And we must always work to help others understand that this disease can happen to anyone. And there's a simple solution that you can all participate in to end the stigma of the disease of addiction and empower recovery. And that simple solution is to talk. Just talking about the simple solution is just talking about how addiction has impacted your life or others' lives will help to eliminate the stigma. My challenge to all of you this week is to talk to 3 people about how addiction has impacted your life or the life of others that especially drinking, and especially, if it's affected you as a young person also. Having the courage to talk about it is really, really important and can help so many other young people. Talking about it will help normalize the conversation around this disease and ultimately save lives. So, I'm truly grateful to be the First Lady of North Dakota and have the opportunity to serve as the First Lady. But you know what? I am even more grateful to just be Catherine, a face and voice of recovery, helping to eliminate the stigma of the disease of addiction. Thank you so much for including me today.
Mrs. Burgum, thank you for joining us. And even more importantly, thank you for turning that adversity into action, being such a powerful champion for helping us normalize this conversation. Like I said, we're very proud to call you our partner and friend and look forward to hearing from you more throughout this conversation. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Last but not least, batting cleanup. We're very proud to have Jessica Leahy. Jessica speaks to parents, educators, school administrators, coaches, parents, and community leaders about the science of learning, motivation, engagement, and substance abuse prevention, all in the service to the belief that adults have the power to help students become more autonomous, competent, connected, and fulfilled. Her first book, I should say, The Gift of Failure, how the best parents learn to let go so their children can succeed, was a New York Times bestseller and has empowered so many to strengthen homeschool partnerships, support students as they learn from their mistakes, and to forge stronger, more trusting relationships with their children. Her second book, The Addiction Inoculation, Raising Healthy Kids in the Culture of Dependence, is the culmination of her experience as an alcoholic with over 6 years of recovery, the parent of 2 kiddos, and 20 years in the classroom teaching English, Latin, and writing in every grade from 6 to 12, and 5 years spent also teaching an inpatient drug and alcohol rehab center for adolescents. Jessica, thank you as well for joining us today. We're really proud to have you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. And I think I mean, Catherine's message is so fantastic. And I realized actually, this year we were joking earlier about the fact that days don't matter. Apparently years don't matter either, because I have almost 8 years of recovery. I took an entire year away from myself last time I told someone. So it's just flown by, I have to say. And the cool thing about being in the place where I am now as a teacher, as a mom, I have 2 kids. I have a 22 and a 17-year-old. The thing I really wanted was to figure out that when we say substance abuse is preventable, what that means. As a mom, I really wanted to know what that meant for my kids, because they came into this world with an increased risk of substance abuse. And I wanted to know what that meant for my students, what we could and maybe couldn't have done to help them along the way. And it turns out that there are lots of things that we can be doing in schools. And as a journalist, my niche has been the intersection of parenting and education for a long time now, about 10 years. And I'm absolutely fascinated by the things that we do at home and the things that we do at school, and how they help us learn and become the best people that we can become. And I think the big goal especially for this new book and for talking a lot about my own recovery is, I know that every single time I go up on stage and I mention that I'm in recovery, I get a couple of emails from people who are in the audience who are saying, I just have this question to ask, or I'm a little worried about my friend, or, and especially a lot of questions from students. And so for me, my entire adult life has been dedicated to teaching and helping kids grow into their best selves. And more than anything else, I want to protect your brains. I want your brains to have the ability to mature and to do all of the things that the adolescent brain is in the process of doing, which is being amazing and incredible and growing synapses, and your neurons are myelinating and you're just becoming so efficient and amazing. And I want that to happen unimpeded. So I'm just humbled and amazed and so happy to be here today so that we can talk a little bit about what we can all do to help protect kids' brains and just delay until your brains are done developing and you're the amazing adults that you can be.
Yeah, well, that's very well put, Jessica. I really appreciate that perspective, and I'm excited to learn more from you as we chat here in just a few moments. Panelists, thank you all. I think that was a great overview of the unique expertise that you have. But with all due respect, we're now going to turn to the real experts on underage drinking, Sophia, Riley, and Emma, who are representing the great states of Pennsylvania, New York, and California. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. I know you certainly have unique perspectives, and more importantly, you have questions for our panelists. So I will turn it over to you to get the party started.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. My name is Emma. I joined SAD in my senior year of high school this year. In recent months, my brother came back home to live with us while he battles an intense and difficult alcohol addiction. When he almost made the decision to take his life, I became keenly aware of the grip that alcohol had on him. SAD has been amazing for me. I'm committed to working with SAD because I don't want others to experience what I am seeing him go through right now. Yes, all of your panelists' presentations were amazing, and I just have a few questions for you. My first question would be for everyone who's willing to answer. So that is, what is the most important thing young people should know about underage drinking?
I've traveled all across the country so many times back and forth in the last few years. and really have had the opportunity to talk to students and talk to parents. And one of the things that really kept coming up was, whether they were a student or parent, are saying, oh, well, thank goodness, I'm just trying alcohol, or a parent saying, oh, thank goodness my child is just, drinking alcohol and not doing anything else. And I don't think that what they really understand is that leads to destructive behavior. It's sort of like saying, oh, thank goodness, my child wears a seatbelt half the time. If this were our child, we say, no, buckle up, lock the doors, be safe. We love you, we protect you. And it's the same with alcohol. And that's one of the things that we've learned scientifically, is that it does impair the decision making. And so the impact that it has in making those poor decisions really is what's troublesome. You get behind the wheel of a car, and God forbid, you're in a fatal accident, or you injure or kill someone else. These are horrible lifetime decisions. The other thing that we see with alcohol sometimes, or any of these drugs, is that when you're younger you start, the less likely you are to go to a parent or a teacher for help. And so it's also critical to understand that you be there. And Emma, thank God for you and being there for your brother and talking about this, and that you're that rock of support for him. And so that's what we want to be able to do across the country. And we're so fortunate to have the First Lady of North Dakota. The governor runs the state, the First Lady runs the country on this issue, and is so willing to talk about this, to take away the stigma. And of course, it's sad, as you know, we want to help every student. We don't care about their demographics. We don't care. This disease does not, impact just one group. And so we want to help everyone. We want to help your brother. We want to help all of the, the students out there on this issue.
I just wanted to mention how heartening it is to hear that you're trying to connect with your brother, because one of the things we talk about a lot in recovery is the opposite of addiction is connection. And one of the reasons that I started to drink as a young kid is because I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to get over my social anxiety. I wanted to be able to walk into a party and not feel like I didn't belong there. Like, who are you? You're not one of the popular kids. I wanted, as soon as I drank alcohol, I started to feel like maybe that piece of me that I felt was missing was suddenly back. And the problem for me is that the more I drank, the more it distanced me from other people. And by the time I got to the point where I had just had it, I was exhausted, I was anxious, I wasn't sleeping anymore. My relationships were falling apart, and my friends were starting to pull away from me, because the very people that I most wanted to impress, and the people that I wanted to drink to feel comfortable talking to, were the very people who were now saying, you're a little much for me now, and were starting to push me away. And so while that first drink can really make us feel like, oh, I can walk in and feel great, the problem is that eventually, for me anyway, it became the very thing that distanced me from other people. And I missed people so much. And it wasn't until I stopped drinking and I started dealing with the question of why I felt like I wasn't enough in the first place without the alcohol there. Now, when I walk into a party or I walk into a dinner thing, I actually do feel like I'm enough to be there, because I was able to deal with the stuff underneath, the stuff that I didn't have to deal with while I was drinking to cover it up. And that's pretty great, I think, anyway. So as the reason I wanted to mention that to you is that as hard as it is to watch your brother go through what he's going through, you should know that underneath all of it, he probably feels profoundly alone. And the more connected you are to him in a healthy way, the more you let him know that you love him, the more that promise of connection remains there. And that's the best possible thing you can do for him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jessica, with what you were saying, that, Emma, I can't imagine what you and your family are going through and how challenging that is. But, letting your brother know that you're just there for him in a, completely judge-free way is kind of the most important thing. The one thing I wanted to mention too about young people and drinking is that, you become so vulnerable because you aren't making good decisions. And safety and, being, in a victim of, assault or something, I mean, it's so important to think about the risks and think about the consequences. And I was the same way, it was like, I had a lot of friends and I was really popular, but then when I was drinking, I became somebody that people didn't really want to be around. And so, that's the other thing to think about is it's just, there's so much more downside and so much more upside from not drinking, in high school and young people.
And Emma, thanks for having the courage to share that. I know that's sometimes really tough to share something personal like that. So I think all of us really appreciate your willingness to share that. That really means a lot to all of us.
Yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity to be able to come here. Mrs. Bertram, I did want to ask you, my next question is, do you believe there's a correlation between the age you begin drinking and the likelihood of becoming an alcoholic?
Yes, as I mentioned, I often, I can't sort of go back and take back my, my life, but I often wonder, because I now know, and we've talked about a little bit that your brain is still developing when you're young. And, I often wonder, gosh, if I would have stopped, in high school, would I've had so much more opportunities in my life rather than struggling for 22 years with addiction, and so we know there is science to back that up, that yes, there is a direct correlation between drinking as a young person and, having substance use disorder in later in life. And so, yes, there's definitely a correlation. And, thank goodness there are so many more resources in schools now and in communities and for young people to be able to reach out for help. And I'm so grateful that there are so many more resources than there were, when I was younger.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Bertram. Mr. Carroll, how do you think drinking impacts a teenager differently than an adult when they begin drinking?
I think it's a great question. And one of the things that really sort of sticks out in terms of being a father to three people but also going out and, as I said, sort of traveling around is an adult, someone over the age of 21. Maybe you see your parents, at a party or go out to dinner and they'll have, they know they could have, one glass of wine and that's, they wouldn't have anything else and drive home. The younger you are, the less that you understand the physical impact that it has on your body. And so that's one of the more immediate things that we've seen. One of the other questions that really, I think is important for everyone to understand is alcohol is alcohol. And, we've been asked the question or, talking, to students in schools who are saying, oh, well, beer is safer than liquor. And, I'm just drinking beer. I'm not drinking, whiskey. And, a lot of the, students don't really understand that it's the same. A 12-ounce beer or a shot of liquor, a shot of whiskey has the exact same amount of alcohol and impacts your body the same way. And we know also as adults that there are also some lifetime, other risks, such as an increased risk of cancer by, drinking heavily. And so, these are all the decisions, that people need to understand that, they're making at a young age that could impact them for the rest of their life. And, and it's hard, not to look over your shoulder and see your sign, be your own kind of beautiful, because that's what we want, all of these students to understand is they are beautiful in their own right. They're beautiful in their own skin, and they're perfect just the way that they are. And they don't need anything else.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Hello, my name is Riley Hull. I joined SAD this year as a freshman in high school. I joined SAD to walk alongside my peers in avoiding and preventing harmful decisions from being made, and I'm extremely passionate about advocating against underage drinking. Today, my first question is for Miss Leahy. Are there signs that parents and teachers should be looking out for that might signal a problem with alcohol?
So often when we talk about ways to sort of predict who may or may not have problems with alcohol is we look at risk factors, and we look at things like, my kids, my sons now are 22 and 17, and we have a lot of conversations about what it feels like when something turns from, just periodic use to abuse. Even though I even have a son who's of legal age to drink, we talk a lot about what it feels like when you start looking forward to, having a drink a little too much, or when you find that it's getting a little bit difficult for you to give up because they have a genetic predisposition to substance abuse. And that's just something they were born with. And that's, for me, that's good information to know, because then we can have lots of conversations around that. When kids have gone through a lot of trauma in their childhood, sometimes when you've dealt with difficult things, if you've lost a parent, or if you grew up with a lot of violence around you, those are things that that can not only make us sad, but can affect our mental health. And so we really need to ask for help when we're feeling, there's this saying in clinical work where we say you have to name it to tame it. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling lonesome, if you're feeling like you just can't handle it on your own, you have to ask for help about that. And that's going to really help. Sometimes one of the things I joke about a lot is people say that, people who love risk, who love, jumping off the roof into the pool or driving really fast and that sort of thing, people who really sort of need that adrenaline rush. Sometimes as parents, we look at those kids and we say, I'm a little bit worried about, my kids hanging out with those kids a lot, because kids who are willing to take a lot of risks, there is the chance that they may be more willing to take risks around substances and other kinds of risks like that. But from my perspective, as a teacher, I keep an eye out for any time I see a sudden change in my students. Anytime I see someone suddenly gaining weight or losing weight, or someone suddenly not sleeping enough, or suddenly someone who's normally quite happy suddenly feeling sad, or someone who actually is pretty low key suddenly feeling really happy all the time. Those are the things I watch for, because that indicates to me that something's brewing with them, that they're not feeling themselves. And that's when I start to think about, their risk factors for substance abuse going up. So sudden changes, not being able to talk about emotions. I think we all know people who are kind of reluctant to talk about how they're feeling. And for those people, I think it's really great for us to set an example of talking about how we're feeling. We do it a lot around here, because they unfortunately or fortunately have a mom who doesn't really let them get away with shoving all those bad feelings down, because that essentially shoving all those feelings down and getting into a position where you feel like the only thing that's going to make you feel better is getting outside of yourself. I want my kids to know that they can come to us, they can ask for help. And if they need additional help other than just talking to us, that we'll get that help for them, because it's going to be really important for them to talk about whatever they're feeling. And especially right now during the pandemic, so many kids have had control taken away. Like, you guys have so little control over your world, even on a good day when everything is normal. And during this year, you've had so much control taken away. And that can be really frustrating, and it can make you feel sad and like you have no control over your own life, let alone the world. And helping kids I've been talking a lot with parents lately about helping kids, giving kids opportunities to have some control over something, so that you can get that feeling of self-efficacy back. And those are the things that I tend to think of first when I'm thinking about who's at risk for substance use and abuse, is kids who are suffering and don't have the words to talk about it. Those are the things I like to try to help out with the most.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Ms. Leahy. My next question is a question for everyone. What resources are available for parents and teachers who are looking for ways to help students, especially during the COVID crisis?
Oh, so many great allies during this. We've been leaning really hard on school counselors. You have to remember, school counselors, the people who work in schools these days, have to have a master's degree. These are people who are really qualified to be helpful. And if they can't help you one-on-one, they're really good at finding resources out in the community who can. The other person you may not think of very often, but who is specifically trained to help you with talking about your worries. And, if you're feeling like we're in a position where you felt in danger because you got in a car with someone who was drinking, your pediatrician and your family care doctor, those people are specifically trained to do screening and to talk to you about whether or not you need extra help talking to someone, or they can pair you up with someone in your community who can help you out. So I'm a big fan of finding the allies, the school, the teachers, the school counselors, the pediatricians. And of course, if you need help right away, absolutely you need it right away. I'm a big fan of pointing people toward the SAMHSA helpline, SAMHSA. It's a wonderful place to go if you feel like you need help right away. And the one last thing I want to mention is that if you're worried about a friend of yours and you're worried that a friend of yours is not safe, I want to encourage you to not feel like you have to fix it for them, but that your job is really to help your friend get help, and not that it's not your job to take on their problems for them, because your friend is really going to appreciate it in the long run if you put them in arm's reach of help as opposed to trying to solve their problem for them.
Such an important point, Jessica. Really appreciate that. Jim, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously some of the work, that we're doing at SAD is really, directly related to that question. And it really is a good one, Riley, about making sure that everyone has the resources, including teachers, that Jessica talked about, and parents, so that they understand and that they're willing, to be there and be a soft place to land, for their teenager, for their child, to come to them openly. Riley, it's hard to believe, but I was once in high school. And I know it doesn't seem like I could ever have been in high school, but I actually met my wife just about a year older than you are now. And I'll tell you, alcoholism, the disease of alcohol, ran in both of our families. And it was one of the things that, we were both very hush hush, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone. And even, when we first started having kids, we didn't really talk about it. And then we realized that's the worst thing that you can do. And so, Jessica, I was about to say, ever since then, you should hear we are completely open. Okay, one of the 4 grandparents, had a severe alcohol addiction. You're at an increased risk. And, Riley, I'll tell you that, as the First Lady knows, and as Rick knows, one of our kids developed a dependence to opioids, started with a prescription. And the blessing that came out of this, that's one, was for me to be able to go into this field. That's when I realized this is where I belonged. But the other was, for our child to come to us, because they were over the age of 21, the prescription was theirs, but came to, my wife and said, I need help. I've been taking a prescription. The doctor has been writing this, for 6 months, and suddenly decided I'm not writing it anymore. And I'm panicking. And so, we were able to get them into detox that day. And now we're 3 years into recovery. And so it's making sure, that everyone understands, the value of having an open dialogue with your friends, but also your parents and your teachers and your pediatrician, and others in your life. So great question, Riley.
Yeah. Mrs. Burgum.
Well, I'm going to, I love everything that everybody else has said, but I'm going to advocate for, using the tools available at the state level. Every state has, human services, behavioral health, lots of groups. In our state, we have a program that we've developed called Parents Lead. And it's an incredible program. It provides parents and caregivers with a variety of tools and resources, about how to talk to kids, how to talk to young people. Like during COVID, they focused a lot on how to support students and, your kids during the pandemic, and, distance learning and not being in school, and, all of those things. And then also, really focused on, how to be able to see the signs, if someone's really struggling. And so, I would advocate that, that is your state has likely a lot of resources available. We also have something in our state called Recovery Talk, and that's a incredible opportunity to reach out for help, it's a phone line that is staffed by all peer support specialists in our state. And these are people with lived experience. And you can call them and say, I'm struggling with X, Y, or Z, and they'll help you. They'll get you on the right path to somewhere else. I'm pretty sure most every state has that kind of thing available also. So I'd advocate for, parents and teachers to be looking at that. Usually, your people like the superintendent of education or public instruction, they all can help hook up parents and teachers. So I'd look to all those resources that are already available for free, in your state.
Yes, thank you all so much for sharing, especially resources at different levels that can be accessed. My last question from me is for Mr. Carroll. How does drinking impact a youth differently than an adult when they first begin drinking?
Yeah, Riley, it's a great question. We talked about it a little bit. I think, really what we're seeing is the failure to sort of understand the long-term ramifications of drinking alcohol at a young age. And, what we know, and the First Lady talked about this, the younger you start with any of these drugs, whether it's alcohol or marijuana, cigarettes, vaping, the greater the chance of becoming addicted, the greater health risk that develop. And so, what we know, the Surgeon General talked about this about a year ago, that the brain continues to develop until age 25. And so any of these substances, any of these drugs that we consume prior to them can permanently alter the brain. And so that is really one of the biggest impacts that it sort of has. And I look over your shoulder and I see there's the space shuttle, there's all sorts of cool stuff over your shoulder. Those are put together by fabulous, beautiful people that, who are fully working and in touch, with their capacity to do just unbelievable things. And that's what we want, for everyone, and not, to succumb to the disease of addiction. And so, that's one of the things that we really are trying to do.
Awesome. Last but not least, Sophia, over to you.
Hi, all. My name is Sophia Thompson, and I'm a senior at Steel Valley Senior High School in Munhall, Pennsylvania. I've been a member of SAD since 2019, and I am the president of my school's chapter. In addition to that, I am on the Pennsylvania SAD Student Leadership Council, and I am the digital engagement specialist for the Pennsylvania DUI Association. Inspired by my father's 27 years of sound sobriety, I want to advocate for avoiding the path that he was formerly on, because he's living a really great life now. So my first question is for Mrs. Burgum and Ms. Leahy. What do you believe is the most effective deterrent to keep a teenager from experimenting with alcohol?
The research is actually really clear on that, and that's that information, honest, real, true information. And when I say information, I mean a few things, like, when an 8th grader is, offered a drink and they're told, oh, it's no big deal, everybody does it. What's really great for an 8th grader to know is, well, that's not true. Only 24% of kids in 8th grade have tried alcohol by the time they finish 8th grade. There's this crazy thing that we do in our brains as humans, actually, all of us do it. It's this thing called pluralistic ignorance, where we tend to overestimate other people's investment in, for example, alcohol. So if we were to ask a whole bunch of kids to estimate how much their friends drink and how much their friends care about drinking, they would be likely to overestimate that. And it turns out that some people will actually raise their own drinking in order to sort of meet this standard that they think everyone else is drinking at, and that it turns out it's not true at all. And so one of the things that we as adults can do is sort of give kids, number one, refusal skills, help kids for example, with my kids, one of the things I always do before I go to a dinner party or any kind of party is my husband and I we have like an exit strategy. If I'm feeling uncomfortable, or if, I'm just not feeling my resolution is strong to not drink, then we just go and we don't worry about what other people think. And so when my kids started going to parties and things like that, we started talking about exit strategies, and we started talking about excuses you can use if you don't want to drink, but you also don't want to leave. Giving kids those sort of refusal skills not only helps you feel like you have a way to get out of a situation you're uncomfortable with, it also makes it more likely that you'll use that refusal skill. And it also makes it, and parents like this when I tell them this, it also makes it more likely that the kids will actually talk to their parents about the fact that they did refuse. So it's this wonderful trifecta. I myself, I've spent my whole adult life working with kids. I think teenagers, tweens and teens are the most amazing, intelligent, competent people out there. And I think we underestimate you at our peril, frankly, and to your detriment. And so if we give you the information that you need in order to make smart decisions, we trust you to make smart decisions, and we're there if you need us when you're making those decisions, then that's the best that we can do in order to help you make your own good decisions. So, my plea to parents is always to give kids real information and to trust their kids a little bit more to make some smart decisions.
Yeah, great question and really good stuff, Jessica. Wish I would have had all those tips when I was in high school, but well, the Parents Lead program that we put together, shows through the research that the number one influence on young people are parents, guardians, caregivers, and by extension, teachers, coaches, mentors, so having good role models in life is so important. Like I grew up in a family where, no offense, my parents, were raised however they were raised and, did the best they could with what they knew. But, they would drink wine all through dinner, no, martinis first and then wine through dinner. And then, and then just constantly tell us, but don't you dare drink ever, don't you dare drink, and so the role modeling just wasn't, or even like, well, we can drink and we can have, whatever the explanations are. So, my parents were great role models in a lot of ways, but not necessarily in that way. But having those people in your life, that the other thing is, that are role models. The other thing is just being really active and involved and engaged, in sports and activities and being connected. Just like Jessica said, being connected is so important, and having those people in your life that you can really rely on to be, constants in your life. So those are really two really important things, that are so helpful in, in sort of preventing underage drinking, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you both for those resources. This is a question for Ms. Leahy. What is the best way to start a conversation about underage drinking?
Here's the thing. It's not just one conversation. It's lots and lots and lots of conversations. And we as parents find these conversations, just like the sex conversations, really scary. But here's the thing. The very first time I had to talk to my kids about drinking and about my issues, I actually thought I was going to throw up, but it got easier and easier and easier every single time we talked about it. So now I have, like I said, a 17-year-old and a 22-year-old, and the 17-year-old was in his biology class a semester ago, and his teacher said, was taking a poll, and he said, so how many of your parents talk to you about drugs and alcohol? And my kid laughed, and he's like, when does she not talk to us about drugs and alcohol? And it's the interesting thing about that is that it's not like I'm trying to teach them all the time. It's not one of the things I write about in the book, The Addiction Inoculation, is that my son, Ben, who's now in college, one of his best friends got thrown out of school 3 times for his drinking and drug use. And I was scared to death about their relationship. And what we had to keep talking about it in order for me to understand how to best support him with that relationship. And he said, being friends with this kid was actually really important, not just to our family and not just to Brian, who had the drug and alcohol problem. He's that's his real name, and he's in a big part of the book. But to my son, Ben, Ben learned a lot about what he didn't want by watching what Brian went through. And Brian learned a lot about what he did want by watching what my son was going through. But we had to have a lot of conversations about it. And so when parents ask me that question about how to start these conversations, often the conversation comes up naturally a lot for us when we see an advertisement that's really selling more than just a can of beer. It's clearly selling that you can be popular and thin and pretty and out on a beach on a weekday afternoon with all your friends. We like to talk a lot about what's really being sold to us through advertisements. We talk a lot about members of my family. We've had in the past, we've had Christmases that did not go so well because a family member fell off the wagon and started drinking again. And those conversations about why we had that really horrible Christmas and why this Christmas is so different from that Christmas, those sorts of conversations are the way we start them. It's really, really hard to have these conversations as a parent when you're thinking of it in terms of the conversation, because the one conversation is a really freighted and scary thing for us. But if it's a lot of small conversations, and if they start really young, you start talking with little kids about why that medicine bottle on the cabinet has mommy's name on it and not daddy's name. What would happen if I took medicine that had daddy's name on the prescription? Well, I weigh a lot less than daddy, and that medicine's not for me. And having those kind of conversations about what we put in our bodies and how we stay healthy from a really long age makes it so that as we get older, they're a little bit less frightening. We make it so that it's a natural part of what we talk about in our family, as opposed to a big scary thing that we only do once a year.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that that's a really good way to put it. And then this final question is a question for everyone. What do you think are the most important things parents and adults should know about underage drinking and underage drinking prevention?
In our state, and this probably happens a lot of places, parents sometimes, host their kids drinking in their homes because they think it's a safe, controlled environment. And, but that's very problematic because it kind of normalizes the use of alcohol at a young age, which, as we know, can result in lots of problems. And, there's also a huge liability for that, of course, parents, doing that. So, we've actually created this program in North Dakota called #NotInMyHouse. And it's basically a community prevention effort with the goal of, reducing youth social access to alcohol by raising awareness of social host liability, which is what happens when parents decide to do this kind of thing. And the misperceptions related to and surrounding underage drinking. So the campaign basically works to reduce these parent-hosted parties where alcohol is present, and talks a lot about the risk of that. And the program's actually been recognized by a few different groups, the Community of Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. It's free for any school or community to use. And so I would promote that, through prevention.nd.gov, or let me know and I can hook you up with it. But it's a great program. But that is one thing that I think is, sort of parents have this misconception that, that it's just safer if it's in my house, but it's a really bad idea.
It's a really good point.
Yeah. As I'll go, and then we'll let Jessica wrap up because she's so eloquent. I think, for us as as parents, it's being age appropriate with your kids. But you don't lie to your kids. You're open with them. You talk about the real issues and what's happening. And, it's scary sometimes being a parent because you live in fear of saying the wrong thing or phrasing it the wrong way. But, at the end of the day, if we can just be open, with our children, if you're a teacher, open with your students, it's the ability to sort of make sure. Because, Jessica, you said it, kids are unbelievably smart, right? Teenagers are so much smarter than we are. And one thing they're really good at is detecting a liar. And if they feel like, I mean, right, Jessica? And if we lie to our students, lie, to the groups, they're going to know it. And, they're going to tune out after that. And so, as a parent, to be open. Sophia, congratulations to you and your dad. That's awesome. That's great news. And obviously he is so open with you. And, it takes, the stigma's gone away. You can recognize what it is. It is a disease. It is treatable, and it is something to, be incredibly proud of. Like, gosh, he must be so incredibly proud of you. And so, to be open with your kids, to be able to tell them, look, here are the real issues in our family, and here's what you need to watch out for. That's what we need to do.
One of the things that I think is really important to understand is that adult brains and adolescent brains are just different. They're different because adolescent brains are not quite developed. They're, we're hooking up the lower brain to the prefrontal cortex. So what's really interesting is that there are things that adults can put in their bodies that are not, drugs and alcohol in an adult brain and an adult body is lower risk. It just is. And so, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about adult brains and adult bodies. We're talking about adolescent brains that aren't done growing and won't be done growing until the early to mid 20s. And there's no going back. Once that door of cognitive development closes at the early 20s, it's closed. And if we, for example, we know that the hippocampus in kids who use marijuana often is smaller than the hippocampus in teens who don't smoke marijuana. And the hippocampus is where we form memories. It's where we form the most emotional memories of adolescence. And it's the reason that all of these old fogies on the panel here, all of us, we have these incredibly bright memories from adolescence because adolescents are really good at processing emotional memories. And if I was drinking a lot during my adolescence, I wouldn't have those. And so those are some of the things that are most precious to me. So I think it's just the most important thing I can say to kids to help them understand why drinking and drug use during adolescence is so dangerous. It's because your brains are uniquely sensitive to the things you put in your brain and put in your body. And we just want you to keep your brains and body intact until you can get to adulthood and everything settles down. And then you can make your adult choices. You are free to make your adult choices once you get there. But in the meantime, let us help you protect your brains and your bodies from harm.
That's very well put, Jessica. Wow, I continue to be in awe of all of you, and the information that you've given us has given us a lot to think about, but I think even more importantly, a lot to act on, because we know that conversations like this are just the starting point of really how we change our culture and help young people stay safe. So first to Sophia, Riley, and Emma, thank you guys for being here and asking those questions on behalf of SAD students everywhere. To Mrs. Burgum, Director Carol, and Jessica, thank you guys for being here to lend your knowledge and your expertise to this conversation. We're so thankful that you're able to support SAD Nation in this incredible way. And mostly thanks to responsibility.org, a trusted resource for information and partnership. I would encourage you to check out their website and their social media channels, and also check out SAD's website and our social media channels as we keep the conversation going on Underage Drinking Prevention Month and work together to make sure that every young person achieves the bright future they so deserve. From now, on behalf of all of us, all the panel, we wish you a great rest of your day, SAD Nation. Thanks for tuning in.